Picture the most beautiful city in the world. Now fill it with the smell of its own death. Add 1 million people crammed into streets so narrow that neighbours on opposite sides of the alley can reach out their windows and shake hands. Add volcanic rock underneath that makes it nearly impossible to dig a proper sewer. Add a bay so gorgeous that painters have been trying to capture it for 3,000 years and failing every single time. And in the water of that same bay, the runoff from 200,000 chamber pots emptied every morning. The blood from the slaughterhouses, the grey water from the tanneries, the soft black rot of everything a city produces and cannot explain and does not want to think about. That's Naples, the most beautiful, the most overcrowded, the most fragrant in the worst possible way, a place where you could watch the sun come up over Vesuvius like a painting that shouldn't be real in the morning and be dead from cholera by Thursday. We're going back there tonight. Not as tourists standing on the promenade at Mergellina, watching the fishing boats come in, eating sfogliatelli and pretending the smell is just the sea. We're going into the Bassi, into the Quartieri Spagnoli, into the streets so deep and so narrow that sunlight hasn't touched the stones in decades. One day, one person, everything they would have seen, smelled, touched, survived. I make these history stories, and honestly, I genuinely don't know if you fall asleep to them, or if you're the kind of person who listens to descriptions of 19th century sewage at 2 in the morning and thinks, yes, this is exactly what I needed. Either way, you're here. Get comfortable. Pull the blanket up. Here we go. Your eyes open to darkness. There is a moment, a half second, maybe less, where you don't know where you are. You don't know what year it is. You're just a pair of open eyes in the dark. Then your nose tells you everything. It's not one smell. It's never just one smell in Naples. It comes in layers like geology, like the strata of rock under the city, each one laid down over centuries, each one pressing down on the one beneath it. First, the closest layer, the one that lives inside the room with you. 12 people sleep in this space. Your basso, your ground floor room on the Vico della Serpe, a lane so tight that the buildings on both sides touch overhead at the 3rd floor. 12 people. One tallow candle burned down to a nub on the shelf, and the sweet, sharp smell of 12 sleeping bodies in summer heat. Not unwashed exactly. You washed 2 days ago at the fountain on the corner. But bodies produce what bodies produce, and the room is small, and the single high window, the only window, and it faces a wall, hasn't let real air move through this space since April. Second layer, the basso itself. The walls are stone, old stone, the kind of old that holds moisture no matter what season it is. The floor is packed earth with a thin layer of broken tile that someone laid down maybe 50 years ago. There's a dampness here that never goes away. A cold, wet smell underneath the body warmth. Something slightly mouldy. Something slightly organic in a way that you've stopped trying to identify. Third layer, the street. The Vico della Serpe is 3 feet wide in places. 3 feet. You can touch both walls at once if you spread your arms. The street doesn't drain. There's nowhere for it to drain to. So everything that lands on those stones sits there. The water thrown from the windows each morning, the slops from the macellaria at the corner, the grey water from the woman upstairs who does laundry for a family in the Chiaia district. The stones have been wet for so long they've forgotten what dry feels like. The smell they produce is ancient and specific and not quite like anything you experienced in the village where you grew up, in Avellino province, in the mountains where the air tasted like grass and stone and distance. That was 8 months ago. Fourth layer, the bay. You can't see it from the Vico della Serpe. You've never been able to see it from this street. But Naples is built on a hill that slopes toward the water, and the water is everywhere in this city. In the smell of it, in the humidity, in the way the salt comes in off the Tyrrhenian Sea and mixes with everything else. On good days, when the wind is right, you can smell the sea through all of it. Clean brine, distance, the suggestion of somewhere else. On bad days, when the wind is wrong, you smell what the city has put into that sea, and the sea sends it back. Fifth layer, you, your hands, your clothes. The smell that follows you home from work every day and lives in the cloth of your shirt and the skin of your palms, no matter how many times you scrub them at the fountain. The specific, unmistakable smell of a nettabino, a waste carrier, a man whose job is to pick up what the city of Naples produces and move it somewhere else. Welcome to Naples, 1884. You're Salvatore Esposito, 17 years old. You've been in this city for 8 months, and your hands are already older than the rest of you. The room begins to move before you do. Across from you, on a pallet made of sacking over straw, your landlady's 2 youngest children are already awake, arguing in whispers about something that sounds important only to children. The older one, a girl named Concetta, who is maybe 9, has a cough that she's had since January. It gets better sometimes, and then it gets worse. Nobody in this building has the money to find out which direction it will eventually go. Near the door, the cobbler from Benevento, you don't know his real name, everyone calls him Zu Severio, Uncle Severio, is sitting up on his sleeping mat pulling on his boots in the dark. He does this every morning before light. He has his cobbling station set up under a canvas awning 3 streets over on the Strada del Porto, and he has to be there before the dockworkers start their day, because dockworkers' boots are always needing something. He nods at you in the dark. You nod back. There's a kind of communion in this, the early risers. The people who are awake before the city is awake. You haven't spoken more than 100 words to Zu Severio in 8 months, but you have shared this particular darkness with him every morning, and that means something. You haven't figured out what exactly, but it means something. You sit up. The straw in your pallet shifts and compresses under your weight, protesting. It needs to be replaced, has needed to be replaced for weeks, but you have exactly 1 free hour on Sunday mornings, and you've been spending it sleeping, and the straw can wait. The stone floor is cold under your feet. This surprises you every single morning, the cold of it, even in August. Even in a city that sits in a natural amphitheatre of volcanic rock in the south of Italy in summer heat. The stones hold cold, the way a well does. You stand on them and feel it come up through your soles and into your legs and your spine. A good kind of cold, a waking up kind of cold. Your clothes are in a pile near your pallet, because there's nowhere else to put them. There's no wardrobe in this room. There's no space for a wardrobe in this room. There is a nail on the wall where a crucifix used to hang, and on that nail you hang your better shirt, your Sunday shirt, the one without the permanent grey stain on the left sleeve. But everything else lives in a pile on the floor. You dress in the dark, rough linen shirt worn so often the weave has softened to something almost like skin. A pair of cotton trousers that were, once, a deep blue, and are now the colour of old sky, of the particular faded blue that the whole male working population of this city seems to wear as a uniform. A leather belt, boots that cost you more than 2 weeks' wages and are worth every soldo you spent on them. Thick soles, good. ankle support, the kind of boots that can walk 12 miles of stone streets and still be talking to you at the end of the day, though by then they're usually saying something harsh. Last, your cap, dark grey, wool, worn flat and slightly to the left. You put it on and you are, in some essential way, yourself. Without the cap, you're just a boy from a village. With it, you're a nettabino of the city of Naples, a worker, someone who belongs here. Appearances matter, even in the dark. You need to be at the deposit by 4:30 in the morning. This is not a suggestion. Your padrone, Don Carmelo Ferrante, made this clear on your first day and has made it clear every day since, in ways that range from a calm word to a look that would strip paint. Don Carmelo has the contract for waste collection in 5 streets of the Quartieri Spagnoli, a contract he secured through mechanisms you don't ask about because you're 17 and you want to keep working. The contract says the streets are to be clean by 7 in the morning when the Guardi from the municipality do their rounds. What happens before 7 and how it happens is Don Carmelo's problem to solve and your problem to execute. 4:30 means 4:30. You step out of the Basso and into the Vico della Serpe. The alley hits you all at once. The smell is stronger here than in the room, which tells you something about the condition of the room's ventilation, or its lack. The stones are slick under your boots from last night's moisture. The particular Naples damp that falls after dark even in summer, not quite rain, more like the city breathing on itself. The walls on either side press close. You can see a strip of purple-grey sky, 5 stories up, narrow as a river seen from the bottom of a canyon. Nothing moves in the Vico della Serpe at this hour except cats and the rats that the cats have not yet caught. A cat watches you from a window ledge 3 floors up, perfectly still, following you with its eyes as, if you're the interesting one, you turn left at the end of the alley onto the Vico Lungo del Gelso, which is slightly wider. You can spread your arms here without touching both walls, if you're not too tall, which you aren't, and then left again onto the Salita Sant'Anna di Palazzo, which is where the deposit is. Don Carmelo's deposit is a courtyard, about 8 meters square, off a narrow passage. In the courtyard there are 3 hand carts, 2 wheelbarrows, a stack of canvas sacks that never quite dry out, shovels of various sizes, a set of iron tongs for picking up things you really don't want to touch with your hands, and a trough of grey water with a cake of lye soap on the edge. And already, at 4:20 in the morning, Don Carmelo is here. He's a short man, Don Carmelo. He barely comes to your shoulder, and you're not particularly tall. But he has the density of someone who has spent his entire life carrying heavy things, a compactness about him that suggests that every part of him is exactly where it needs to be, and none of it is wasted. His face is the colour of old terracotta, the South Italian brown that comes from years of outdoor work, and his hands are the most impressive thing about him. Enormous, thick-fingered, permanently black in the creases from decades of handling the same materials you're just starting to work with. He's sitting on an overturned bucket when you arrive, drinking coffee from a small metal cup. Real coffee, not the ersatz, roasted grain brew that most of the Quartieri runs on. The smell of it cuts right through everything else in the courtyard and briefly makes the world seem like a place where things are possible. He doesn't look up when you come through the passage. Esposito, Don Carmelo, the Sant'Anna Channel is backed up again. Start there. He says this the way a man says the sky is blue, as a fact, as something that exists in the world independently of anyone's feelings about it. You stand there for a moment, because starting at the Sant'Anna Channel means going into it, not just clearing it from above, and you've been hoping, with the specific hope of someone who knows perfectly well that hope isn't going to change anything, that someone else would be assigned to the channel today. Don Carmelo finally looks up. His eyes are dark and patient and have seen exactly this expression on exactly this kind of face before. It won't clean itself, he says. You pick up a shovel. Here is something you need to understand about Naples in 1884 before we go any further, because without it nothing else makes sense. Naples is one of the most densely populated cities on earth. In the area called the Quartieri Spagnoli, the Spanish quarters, built in the 16th century to house Spanish military garrisons and now housing approximately 40,000 people in a space that was originally designed for perhaps a third of that number. There are buildings 7 and 8 stories high built so close together that the floors of one building share their roof joists with the walls of the next. There are bassi, ground floor rooms, semi-subterranean rooms that open directly onto alleys that have not seen direct sunlight since the buildings were raised, housing entire families in spaces smaller than a prosperous merchant's wardrobe in London or Paris. And Naples has no sewer system. Not in these streets, not in any meaningful way. There is a system of cunicoli, ancient tunnels cut into the volcanic tuff beneath the city over thousands of years. Some of them Roman, some of them older than that. Some of them dug in the medieval period when Naples was trying to solve the same problem it still hasn't solved. There are pozzi, wells and cisterns dug down into the rock. There are drainage channels carved into the street surfaces, gutters in the technical sense, V-shaped cuts in the stone designed to carry water down toward the sea. But there is no system for sewage, no underground, pipes carrying waste away from where people live, no municipal infrastructure for the removal of what 40,000 people in the Quartieri produce every single day. What there is instead is this: the chamber pot, emptied from the window each morning, the immondizzaio, the rubbish heap at the end of each alley where domestic waste accumulates until someone like you, comes to remove it. And the channels, the open drainage channels that run along the base of the walls, that carry whatever the streets produce down toward the lower city, toward the sea, through whatever underground tunnels happen to connect. When the channels are clear, this system functions after a fashion. It doesn't function well. It doesn't prevent the smells, or the insects, or the slow contamination of the well water that half the Quartieri depends on for drinking. But it moves things. Things flow. When the channels block, from accumulated grease, from discarded vegetable matter, from the sedimentation of years, they don't flow. They sit, they fill, they overflow, and then someone has to go in and clear them. That's you. The Sant'Anna Channel runs along the base of a wall for about 40 meters before it disappears under a building and re-emerges into a larger channel 2 streets over. At its worst point, the channel is about 60 centimeters wide and roughly half a meter deep, and it hasn't been properly cleared since last winter, which means the accumulation of 8 months of what 8 months of 40,000 people produces is sitting in it, fermenting quietly in the August heat. The smell when you crouch down at the entrance to the channel's worst section is genuinely beyond description. Not because it is indescribably foul, it is foul, deeply, cosmically foul, but because the human nose doesn't have the vocabulary for it. There's the sulphur of anaerobic decomposition, the sweet rot of vegetable matter going past the point of compost and then underneath. That's something else, something biological and human that the language of smell was not designed to categorize. You have a rag soaked in vinegar tied around your lower face. It doesn't help much. But it helps a little, and a little is what you've got, so you take it. You lower yourself into the channel. This is the part of the job that the men who contracted with the city of Naples did not mention in any document they signed or any agreement they made. The part where a 17-year-old from Avellino crouches in a stone channel that has not been properly cleaned in 8 months, in August, in the heat, and begins removing accumulated matter with a long-handled scraper and a canvas sack. The floor of the channel is irregular stone, worn smooth by decades of water and everything else. Under your boots, it's slick in ways that suggest you don't want to think about what you're walking on. The walls of the channel are close enough that your shoulders nearly touch both sides, and they're green with something that grows in darkness and moisture, a growth you've learned not to look at too carefully. You start at the far end and work toward the outlet. The scraper has a blade about 30 centimetres wide and a handle long enough to let you work bent double rather than on your knees, which matters more than you can say because your knees are already carrying the permanent damage of 8 months of this kind of work, a grinding that lives in both joints on cold mornings and on hot mornings and on mornings in between. Your lower back is its own ongoing narrative. The accumulated material in the channel comes free in chunks with a sound that you have deliberately trained yourself not to name, and goes into the canvas sack with the iron tongs, and the sack goes up onto the street, and eventually this will all go onto the cart that Giustino, the other netturbino who works Don Carmelo's contract, is pushing through the alley above you. It takes you an hour and a half to clear 40 metres of channel. When you climb back out onto the street, Giustino looks at you with the professional respect of one man for another man who has done a difficult thing adequately. "Sant'Anna," he says, "all of it." He nods. He's 30, Giustino, with a wife and 3 children in a basso on the Vico Lungo del Helso, and he's been doing this work for 8 years. And he has the flat effect of a man who has made his peace with every aspect of his professional life through the simple mechanism of stopping thinking about it. "Get some water," he says. "Then we've got the Vico del Fico." You get some water. Water in the Quartieri Spagnoli in 1884 is a story that starts badly and gets worse. The city of Naples has water. It has the Carolino Aqueduct, built by Bourbon kings in the 18th century, bringing water down from the mountains of Campania through hundreds of kilometres of tunnels and pipes. It has the ancient Roman system still partially functioning underneath the city. It has the sea, obviously, though the sea is salt and a kilometre away, and getting there requires navigating the lower city and its distinct challenges. What the Quartieri does not have is easy access to clean water. The fountains, and there are fountains, several of them, maintained at municipal expense, their stone basins worn to silk by the hands of 100 years of people drawing water, are shared by thousands of households. The lines at the fountain at the top of the salita are already long at 6 in the morning. Women with terracotta conche balanced on their heads, children with small tin pails, older men with yoked buckets who charge a few centesimi to carry water for those who can't. You fill your tin cup from a smaller pipe, a side pipe off the main fountain that runs slower and that most people ignore because they want the main flow, the full gush, not the trickle. The trickle takes longer. The trickle is also, in your experience, colder, and cold water is the nearest thing to a luxury you have access to in August. You drink. The water tastes like stone, like the tuff it's come through, the volcanic rock that Naples is built on and carved from, and that underlies everything in this city. The streets, the buildings, the ancient tunnels full of darkness and history and the accumulated secrets of 3,000 years. There's a mineralness to it that's not unpleasant, almost clean, almost. Because here's the thing about water in Naples. Here's the thing that nobody wants to say out loud, that the newspapers write around in their careful language, that the city's health authorities have been trying to quantify in reports that pile up in municipal offices and are acted on approximately never. The water in the Quartieri cisterns is not clean. The cisterns are the old pozzi, wells dug into the tuff, some of them Roman or earlier, that have been collecting and storing water for longer than anyone can precisely document. They're built into their foundations of buildings, under courtyards, under the floors of the bassi. They're the backup, the private water supply, what you use when the public fountain is too far, or the line is too long, or it's the middle of the night and someone has a fever and needs water now. And they sit in the same rock as everything else, as the channels, as the old tunnels, as the waste of the city seeping slowly through volcanic tuff, moving in the direction that gravity suggests, picking up what it finds on the way. In 1884, a German scientist named Robert Koch has just confirmed what several other scientists have been suggesting for a decade, that cholera, the great democratic killer, the disease that has swept through Naples in waves throughout the century, 1836, 1854, 1866, is caused by a specific bacterium that lives in contaminated water. That the water of the Quartieri, the cistern water, and sometimes the fountain water, carries this bacterium, and that drinking it is, in a precise and documented scientific sense, drinking disease. This information is available to the city's administrators. It hasn't changed much yet. You finish your water, you go back to work. The Vico del Fico is 3 streets from the Sant'Anna Channel, and the problem there is different. Giustino explains it as you walk, pushing the cart between you, navigating a street barely wide enough for the cart's wheels, with a familiarity that speaks of hundreds of identical mornings. Immondizia, he says. The word means rubbish, waste. The general category of things the city produces that are not sewage but are also not anything anyone wants. The immondezzaio at number 12 hasn't been cleared in... He makes a gesture that means a while, a concerning while. The specific Neapolitan gesture that encompasses everything from mildly inconvenient to actively catastrophic. You round the corner. The immondezzaio, the rubbish heap, at number 12 of the Vico del Fico has not been cleared in considerably more than a while. It occupies most of the dead-end section of the alley. It's been there long enough that the pile has developed a kind of internal architecture, the newer waste settling against and over the older waste, the whole structure reaching to about chest height and roughly 3 meters across. In the heat it steams slightly. Things are happening inside it that represent the full life cycle of organic material in compressed form, decomposition, insect activity, the particular chemistry of anaerobic breakdown that produces methane and sulfur compounds, and the specific sweet rotten smell that is the signature of Naples in summer. At the base of the pile, near the wall, there's a stream of liquid the colour of old tea running along the gutter toward the channel at the end of the alley. Children's drawings on the wall above the pile, chalked in the past few days. Stick figures, a boat, a sun. Drawn by children who live in the bassi facing this alley, who come out to play in the only outdoor space they have access to, which is here. In front of the pile, apparently untroubled by its proximity, an old woman is sitting on a chair she's carried out from her basso, mending something. She nods at you when you arrive with the cart. The nod says, "About time." The nod also says, I've been here for 70 years. I've seen piles like this before. I'll see piles like this after. Bring me something cheerful if you have it. You don't have anything cheerful. You have a cart and a shovel and the full adult knowledge of what comes next. Buongiorno, Donna Carmela, Giustino says to her. Buongiorno, she says, and goes back to her mending. You start with the shovels. The work is exactly what it looks like and feels like and smells like, and there is no way to make it anything other than what it is, so you don't try. You find the particular mental position that you found somewhere around month 3 of this work, a kind of distance from your own senses, a small step back from the information your nose and skin are sending you, and you shovel, and the cart fills, and the pile diminishes, and the alley emerges underneath it like a floor being uncovered. The stones beneath the pile are black and wet, and have been that way for so long they may never dry out. That's tomorrow's problem, or no one's problem. Stones dry eventually. Usually. By the time the pile is cleared and loaded, 2 full cartloads, which you and Giustino push through the waking streets to the nearest collection point, a larger depot at the edge of the Quartieri where the municipality's main wagons come to. The city has fully woken around you. Because this is what Naples looks like in the morning, and you need to see it properly. The Quartieri Spagnoli at 6:30 in the morning is not a place that wakes gradually, softly, the way the countryside does. Light spreading slow over hills and the birds starting before the people. Naples erupts. One moment the alleys are grey and quiet, and the next they are full of noise and colour and motion, and the smell of coffee and bread and bodies, and the particular intensity of 40,000 people resuming their lives simultaneously after a brief pause for sleep. Shutters bang open all the way up every building. Women appear in windows and call down to other women. Children materialize from doorways and sprint through alleys on errands that seem urgent, but are probably made up. The sound of hammering from the cobbler 2 streets over. The sound of a man singing from inside a workshop. A sad, repetitive melody that you recognize as a Neapolitan folk song about a girl who died, because most Neapolitan folk songs are about a girl who died, or a sailor who didn't come back, or both simultaneously. The venditori appear. The street sellers of Naples are their own civilization, their own ecosystem. There's the acqua frescaio, the water seller who carries an enormous terracotta urn on his back and sells cups of water mixed with lemon and a little salt to anyone who's thirsty enough to pay a couple of centesimi. There's the woman with the fried food, zeppole, little donuts fried in lard, quoppo of mixed fried things from the sea, things that were fish earlier this morning and are now batter and crackling fat, and a smell that makes your stomach clench with desire. There's the old man with the octopus, perpetiello boiled in a bucket over a small fire, sold by the piece, eaten standing up at a corner, the soft flesh of the sea stripped from the tentacle with your teeth. Food in the Quartieri exists at street level. In the Bassi, the cooking fireplace is tiny. Sometimes it's a single brazier burning charcoal, and most people can't heat enough food for a family indoors. So the city cooks in public. It eats in public. The food chain of the Quartieri Spagnoli runs along the street and through the windows and up the staircases and down the alleys, and at every step something is changing hands. A coin for a cup of coffee, a coin for a piece of bread, a coin for a cup of minestra, the thick vegetable soup that is the daily foundation of every family that can afford it, and the aspirational meal of the families that can't. You're hungry. You haven't eaten since yesterday evening. A bowl of pasta e fagioli that your landlady, Donna Giovanna, put out for the people of the basso before the door was locked for the night. It wasn't much. The pasta thin and slightly overcooked. The beans soft past the point of texture. The broth more water than broth. But it was warm and you ate it gratefully, standing at the edge of the room because there's only one table and the children get to sit at it. You want to stop at the Zeppel woman's station. Your nose has been tracking her since you turned onto the main street. You don't stop. Your break isn't until 8. Don Carmelo is very clear about breaks. You push the cart past the Zeppoli woman and her halo of frying fat smell, and you keep moving. Here is what the Quartieri Spagnoli looks like from street level, and you need to understand this because it explains everything else. The streets run in a grid. This is unusual in Naples, where most streets follow the contours of history rather than any plan. A grid laid down in the 16th century when the Spanish viceroy Pedro de Toledo needed to house his garrison and decided that the hill west of the old city centre was the place to do it. The streets run east-west and north-south at right angles, which sounds orderly, which sounds like something that should work. But the streets are 3 to 5 meters wide, and the buildings are 8 floors tall. You know what that means architecturally? It means the sky is a distant event, a thin stripe of light or blue or grey, depending on the weather, visible only if you tilt your head back at an angle that strains your neck. The light that reaches street level in the Quartiere arrives as a kind of grey ambient glow, diffused and distant, the light of a room with its curtains mostly drawn rather than the light of an outdoor space. And in that grey light, in the narrow spaces between buildings that press toward each other overhead, life is conducted with the specific intensity of people who have no private space and no other option. Laundry hangs on lines strung between buildings. The famous Neapolitan pani, sheets and shirts and children's clothes, and a woman's good dress and a man's Sunday suit. All of it damp and coloured and blocking what light would otherwise filter down, so the street level is permanently in the shade of domestic life suspended overhead. The bassi open directly onto the street. No setback, no threshold except for a single step, so that walking down any street in the Quartiere means walking through the peripheral vision of dozens of lives simultaneously. An old man sitting inside his basso, visible through the open door, repairing a chair. A young woman nursing a baby. 3 men, playing cards at a table set up inside a basso that is also simultaneously a barbershop. The specific smell of each basso, cooked food, animals, the particular human smell of the people who live there, spilling out onto the street as you pass. Pigs exist in the Quartieri. Not many. Not as many as in previous decades when they were more or less official members of the city's waste management system, eating what fell on the streets. But still. A pig looks at you from a doorway on the Vico Lungo. The pig has the thoughtful expression that pigs always have, the expression that suggests they've assessed the situation and found it unsurprising. Dogs, everywhere. Not pets, or not primarily pets, but the semi-feral city dogs that live in the margins of human society, eating scraps, sleeping in doorways, maintaining a complex social order that parallels and occasionally intersects the human one. They give you a wide berth. The smell of the cart is probably doing something to their processing. Above all of this, the laundry, the bassi, the animals, the vendors, the noise, above all of it, the walls. The walls of the Quartiere are extraordinary objects. They're covered in a layer of life that has accumulated over 3 centuries. Old plaster over older plaster, patches and repairs in a dozen different materials, shrines to saints tucked into niches and hung with flowers and ex-votos, the little painted images of people who were saved from drowning or falling or disease, their gratitude made permanent in paint, names scratched into plaster, political slogans from movements that no longer exist, the faded outlines of commercial signs for businesses that closed before your parents were born. The walls of the Quartieri are a kind of archive, an involuntary museum. You walk past all of this every morning and you've stopped seeing most of it, the way you stop hearing the bells after the first month. But sometimes something catches you, a new shrine appearing, overnight flowers still fresh at corner where someone was hurt or died, a new piece of chalked graffiti that makes one of the other workers laugh, a window that was always shuttered suddenly open, someone new behind it, someone's face that wasn't part of the street's inventory until today. The city renews itself constantly. People arrive and people leave and people die and people are born and the walls accumulate everything and the channels fill and you come with your cart and your shovel and you clear what can be cleared and you do it again tomorrow. By 8 o'clock, you and Justino have done 3 streets and your back has opinions that you're trying not to listen to. The break happens at the deposit in the courtyard. Don Carmelo has set out a plate of bread and some cured olives, which is his version of employer generosity, and a tin pot of coffee substitute on a brazier. You eat standing up because the bucket seats around the edge of the courtyard are already occupied by 2 of the other workers, Raphael, who is 40-something and has worked for Don Carmelo since before you were born, and the boy called Pepiello, who is probably not 15, and who Don Carmelo has taken on for the light work, the cart pushing and the sweeping, because his mother has 5 other children and no husband, and the 10 lire a month that Pepiello earns is the difference between a plate of food at night and no plate at night. Pepiello is eating his bread like someone who's afraid it might leave. You recognise that. You ate like that in your first month. You came from a house in Avellino province where food was never abundant. Your father is a sharecropper. Your mother takes in mending. There are 4 children, and the land gives what it gives, and some years that isn't much. But where food was at least regular, where you could assume there would be something on the table, because there had been something on the table yesterday. In the Quartieri, that assumption is more fragile. Some days the bread runs out. Some families go to sleep hungry more than they eat full. You eat your bread and your olives and you drink your imitation coffee, and you look at the small square of sky visible above the courtyard walls, and you think about your mother, because this is when you usually think about your mother. In the early morning pause, when the body is briefly at rest and the mind goes where it wants to go, she would have things to say about the smell of you. Esposito. Don Carmelo is standing in the doorway of the small room at the back of the courtyard that serves as his office, his headquarters, the place where he keeps his accounts, and the signed copy of his contract and a small statue of the Madonna of Piedigrotta, which he touches briefly every morning when he arrives. "This afternoon," he says, "there's a job, the Fontanelle district." You feel something shift in your stomach. The Fontanelle is north, outside the Quartieri. The Fontanelle district sits at the edge of a hill where, for several hundred years, Naples has been burying its poor, its plague dead, its unnamed and unremembered. There are caves in the tuff there, enormous underground vaults filled with bones. The waste collection job at Fontanelle is not a standard street clearing job. What kind of job, you ask? Don Carmelo looks at you with the patience of a man who has explained unpleasant things many times. The kind that pays double. You look at him. The kind, he continues, that involves the drainage from the new tenements they built on the east side, which has been backing up into the lower street for 3 weeks, and the municipality has finally decided to pay someone to address it, and that someone is me, and I'm sending you. A pause. And Justino, he adds, with a slight softening that constitutes his version of empathy. You won't be alone. You will in fact be spending your afternoon standing in drainage from new tenements. Double pay. Fine, you say. Good. He turns back to the Madonna, touches her briefly, turns back. Take the long way, go through the Piazza Dante. He says this in a different tone, softer. The instruction from a boss tone has dropped, and for a moment there's something else, something less legible. Why, you ask? He looks at you for a long moment. There's something in his face that you haven't seen before. Not concern exactly, but its functional equivalent. The look of a man who knows something and is deciding how much of it to say. Because I want you to see the city, he says finally, before it changes. This is, given what you know about Don Carmelo, an extremely strange thing to say. Don Carmelo does not talk about the city. He talks about contracts and channels and the specific chemical properties of certain types of waste blockage. He does not talk about what the city looks like or what happens to it. You look at him. He's already turned away. You pick up your jacket. The Piazza Dante is about as different from the Quartieri Spagnoli as two places in the same city can be. You come out of the network of narrow alleys at the top of the salita, and for a moment the sky opens, actually opens, expands, becomes a real sky rather than a strip of light between buildings, and you're in a real public square, a large one. The semicircle of buildings at the top of the piazza, curving around the north end, was designed in the 18th century by Luigi Vanvitelli, who also built the royal palace at Caserta, which is to say, the man knew what he was doing. The buildings curve like arms around a child. The stonework is the warm grey-yellow of Neapolitan limestone in morning light. In niches along the upper facade, statues of allegorical figures stand watching the piazza, with the expressions of people who've been watching a piazza for 100 years and have made their peace with it. At the centre of the piazza, on a high pedestal, Dante Alighieri stands facing you with the expression of a man who has been to hell and is trying not to make a big deal about it. The piazza is alive at this hour. Vendors on the periphery, a group of school children being herded by a tired nun, men in business suits moving through with the purposeful speed of people who have somewhere to be. 2 old men on a bench in the sun conducting an argument that has clearly been going on for some time and shows no signs of resolution. You stand at the edge of the piazza and feel the sun on your face for the first time this morning. In the Quartieri, you can go a whole day without the sun touching you directly. It's not dark exactly. The grey ambient light is enough to see by, enough to work by. But direct sunlight, the thing that falls on you and warms you, and is warm, is scarce. Here in the piazza it falls on you without obstruction, and you stand in it like a plant. You smell considerably of the work you've done this morning. The school children give you a wide berth. You don't care. You stand in the sun for 2 full minutes and then you start walking north. The route to the Fontanelle takes you through the Sanità district, which is the beating heart of a Naples that tourists don't see and residents of the Chiaia neighbourhood prefer not to acknowledge. The Sanità sits in a valley, an actual valley, carved by ancient rivers into the tuff, and then the city grew over it, built on top of it, and now it's a sunken district surrounded by elevated streets and viaducts, a place you have to actively descend into, as if the neighbourhood has been pressed down by the weight of everything above it. The descent into the sanitar is physical. You walk down a long stone staircase, the steps worn concave by centuries of feet, the handrail long since rusted away, the walls on either side painted in the strong colours that are the sanitar's signature: deep ochre, terracotta red, a blue so intense it hurts. At street level, the sanitar is a neighbourhood that has perfected the art of being very much alive in a very small space. Artisans work in botteghe open to the street. A man turning wooden shapes on a lathe, his shavings curling onto the cobblestones. A woman pressing metal pastry moulds, her arms moving in the rhythm of someone who's done this 10,000 times. 3 men in a wireworking shop, their fingers moving with impossible speed through coils of thin metal. The smell of wood and metal and oil and paint, and underneath it all, the same underlying smell that follows you everywhere in this city. The smell of water that hasn't moved quickly enough. The sanitar has its own relationship with the underground. Literally, underneath the sanitar are catacombs, early Christian burial sites, then plague pits, then the Fontanelle Cemetery itself, the enormous cave system where Naples piled its dead for centuries. The streets of the sanitar are built over the dead, which sounds metaphorical but is architecturally accurate. When buildings in the sanitar develop cracks in their foundations, it's sometimes because the ground beneath them is hollow, because the tuff has been carved and removed for construction or burial, or simply because 3,000 years of people digging tunnels for various reasons has created a city beneath the city, and the city above occasionally notices. You know someone who fell through. This is a true story, not a metaphor. Giustino's cousin, working in a building on the Via Vergini, stepped on a tile floor that cracked and revealed a 2-metre drop into a Roman-era cistern that had been forgotten for approximately 1,500 years. The cousin was unhurt. The cistern was bricked up. This is the kind of story that gets told in the Quartieri as an ordinary anecdote, the kind of thing that happens. You keep walking. Your boots are loud on the cobblestones of the sanitar, a sound that travels differently than in the Quartieri, bouncing off walls set at slightly different angles. The light here is fractionally better. The valley is wider than the Quartieri's alleys, and in that light you can see the palaces, because there are palaces in the sanitar. This is the thing about Naples that constantly resets your assumptions. The neighbourhood that looks, from the descriptions, like it should be uniformly poor, uniformly dark, uniformly desperate. It has palaces. Baroque palaces with grand facades and enormous entrances designed to admit carriages, built in the 17th and 18th centuries by noble families who thought the sanitar would be fashionable and then changed their minds when the city's centre of gravity shifted south toward the bay, leaving their grand residences stranded in a neighbourhood that developed in a different direction. The palaces are still there, still grand, still with their ornate stonework and their carved entrances and their courtyards visible through the half-open gates. But now their ground floors are occupied by workshops and vendors, and Bassi and their piano nobile is divided into apartments, and the families who live at the top can reach their rooms only by stairs that haven't been maintained since the Grand Tour was a thing, and the whole arrangement is a precise physical metaphor for what happened to the Bourbon aristocracy in the decades after Italian unification. But none of that is why you're here. You're here because Don Carmelo told you to go through the Piazza Dante, and you took his instruction at its most literal, and you're going through this sanitar on your way to the Fontanelle job. And because somewhere in the back of your head, Don Carmelo's strange phrase, before it changes, is asking a question you don't yet know how to answer. before it changes. Here's what's going to change, and this is the part that the newspapers are writing about in careful, frightened language, and that the city's administrators are discussing in rooms you'll never enter, and that the king himself will eventually comment on, in a phrase so dramatic it becomes famous: "Bisogna sventrare Napoli." It's necessary to gut Naples. The 1884 cholera epidemic is coming, or rather, it's already here. You don't know this yet. It's early in the year, the summer just beginning to press down, and the rumours have been circulating for weeks. But rumours always circulate in Naples. The city runs on rumours, a city of 1 million people crammed into a space that demands constant information exchange about who is doing what to whom and where the clean water is and which vendor is cheating. So the rumours about cholera in the port, about a ship from Marseille, about a family in the Santa Lucia district, these are just more noise in the general noise. But the epidemic is real. It's been building in the poor district since June. It will kill approximately 7,000 people before it's done, and those are the counted dead, and the counted dead in a city like Naples in 1884 are a fraction of the actual dead, because many of the poor never have their deaths officially recorded. They simply stop being present, and the space they occupied is filled by someone else. 7,000 people in a city built on a waste system that isn't really a system. That puts the drinking water adjacent to everything that shouldn't touch drinking water. That houses 40,000 people in a neighbourhood where the channels block every month and need to be cleared by a 17-year-old with a scraper and a vinegar rag. You don't know any of this yet. You walk through the sanità with the sun on your face and the sound of the fontanelle wind in your ears. There's always wind up at the fontanelle. The hill funnels it. And you think about the double pay and whether it will be enough to buy a decent pair of working gloves, and whether your mother would be pleased or devastated by the work you've ended up doing. You think she'd be both, in equal measure. She'd be devastated by the smell and pleased that you're earning, and devastated that you're earning this way, and pleased that you're not, as she'd feared, starving or in prison. The balance of her feelings would probably tip toward pleased. Probably. The fontanelle is a place where Naples keeps its relationship with death in the most literal sense, and the experience of arriving there for the first time, even for a second time, even for the 10th time, is strange in a way that doesn't wear off. The facade of the Fontanelle Church, the Chiesa di Maria Santissima del Carmine al Fontanelle, sits at the edge of the tough escarpment, backed into the hill. Beyond it, through a gate that's open during the day, the cave begins. The great cavern of the Fontanelle, carved by tough quarrying over centuries, expanded by earthquake and erosion, given to the poor of Naples as a burial site in the 17th century, when plague was filling the city faster than it could inter its dead. 8 million bones, they say. The exact count is, by definition, impossible. 8 million people, or pieces of people, stacked in the volcanic tuff under a neighbourhood where 40,000 currently living people conduct their daily lives above them. The bones have been arranged over the centuries by the Aniemel, the devout women who took it upon themselves to care for the dead, to keep the ossuary clean, to establish relationships between specific skulls, and the living who left candles and prayers and small gifts in the hope of a spiritual patron among the departed. This is a Naples practice, the cult of the anime pezzentelle, the destitute souls, the belief that the unburied, unclaimed dead could be adopted by the living, given a name and a relationship, tended in exchange for intercession. It's not Orthodox Catholicism. The Church has opinions about it. But Naples has been not quite orthodox about its Catholicism for as long as there has been a Naples, and the Fontanelle is the cathedral of that unorthodoxy. You've been to the Fontanelle once, before on a Sunday in February, with Giustino, who wanted to show you what the city was. You walked through the cave in the cold February light, between the stacked walls of bones, past the shrines, skulls in small niches decorated with paper flowers and ribbons and photographs and beads and the candle ends of months of prayer. And you felt the specific feeling that the place creates. Not quite fear, not quite awe, something in between. The feeling of being in a place that has been drenched in the accumulated grief of centuries, where the very air is dense with it. Today you're here to deal with drainage from the new tenements on the east side of the hill. The two things coexist without difficulty in your head, which tells you something about who you've become in 8 months of working in Naples. The drainage problem at the Fontanelle tenements is worse than Don Carmelo described, which means it's exactly as bad as you expected when he said it was bad. The new tenements, built in the 1870s to house workers displaced from the lower city by various improvement schemes that improve things primarily for the people who didn't have to live there anymore, are fine buildings by the standards of what they replaced. 5 stories, solid construction, proper staircases. The architect had ideas about light and ventilation that were well-intentioned. The architect did not have adequate ideas about drainage. The building sits on a slope. The slope means that water and everything water carries wants to run downhill. The drainage pipe designed to carry wastewater and everything else away from the building runs east, then turns north, then is supposed to connect to the municipal drain on the Via Fontanelle. The connection was built to a certain specification. 3 months of a Neapolitan summer, plus the output of 40 families, is a different specification. The pipe is blocked at the junction. The blocked pipe means the waste is going somewhere else, specifically flowing backward and then sideways along the building's foundation and emerging at the base of the east wall, where it's been collecting since the block first developed. The pool at the base of the east wall is approximately 4 meters in diameter and of variable depth. The colour is not something you want to spend time thinking about. The smell is everything you encountered this morning, distilled and concentrated and given 3 weeks to mature in August heat. Giustino is already there when you arrive. He's standing at the edge of the pool looking at it with the expression of a craftsman assessing a particularly challenging piece of work. Started at the junction, you ask? Started at the junction. The block's about 1.5 meters in. We need to clear it from both ends. Both ends, which means one of you goes into the pipe from the connection end, a space approximately 60 centimetres in diameter, concrete, laid at a slight upward angle, and the other works from the building end. You look at the pipe entrance. You look at Giustino. He's been doing this 8 years. His back is demonstrably worse than yours. The pipe entrance requires crawling, and crawling puts everything on the knees. "I'll take the pipe," you say. Giustino looks at you with an expression that might contain gratitude and definitely contains the recognition that he's going to make sure you have a decent meal somewhere in the next week because you have earned it. 5 minutes, he says. "I'll be at the building end. When the block clears, come back out immediately." You understand what he means by immediately. When a pipe block clears, it clears all at once, and everything that was held behind it travels the full length of the pipe in approximately 0 seconds. You tie the vinegar rag around your face, you lie down at the pipe entrance, and you go in. Inside the pipe, the world reduces to two sensory inputs: what you feel and what you can barely see. The concrete is cold against your elbows and your knees through your trousers, a cold that goes straight to the bone, the chill of underground space even in August, the temperature of the tuff which has never been warm and never will be. You move by pulling yourself forward with your forearms, the shovel handle clutched in one hand, the lantern, small, oil burning, barely adequate, clutched in the other. The lantern's light is exactly enough to see 30 centimetres ahead and to confirm that the space is not getting larger. The smell inside the pipe is operating at a register that transcends the merely unpleasant. You've worked in worse, technically. The Santana Channel this morning was by any objective measure more challenging. But there's something about the enclosed space, the way the smell has nowhere to go, that concentrates it to a degree that requires you to consciously control your breathing. Slow, shallow, through the vinegar rag, in, out, keep moving. The floor of the pipe has a residue from 3 weeks of overflow that your elbows move through with a soft resistance, a reluctance, as if the pipe itself doesn't want you to clear it. Your hands are inside your working gloves, worn leather, cracked at the knuckles, but your forearms above the gloves are bare, and the pipe floor is what it is. You feel the block before you see it, a change in the texture under your hands, a density that the shovel handle encounters differently, about 1.5 meters in, as Giustino said. It's vegetable waste mostly, scraps from 40 family kitchens, accelerated by 3 weeks of compression into something that has the consistency of wet cork. Around it, and through it, other materials that you don't inventory. The shovel blade, working in the pipe's constrained space, operates almost like a spoon, small movements scraping material free and piling it to the side so you can move it back out when you reverse. You work, your shoulders burn, the pipe's diameter doesn't allow you to use your arms properly. You're working in a range of motion about 30% of what your muscles want, and the effort of compensating makes everything take 3 times as long and cost 3 times as much. Your neck is bent forward at an angle that it will remember tomorrow. Your knees are already sending up their regular complaints. You work. From ahead of you, muffled by distance and concrete, you can hear Giustino's shovel working from the other end. The sound is weirdly reassuring. A human sound in a small dark space. Evidence of another person existing. Evidence that there's an end to the pipe with open air beyond it. The block loosens. Not all at once. First a section at the edge gives way, and you can feel the slight change in pressure. The beginning of movement. You pull the scraper back. Vai, you shout. A half second. Then the block moves. You've already started moving backward as fast as the pipe allows, which is not very fast, but is faster than you've moved. Through anything in months, your elbows and knees working with an urgency they didn't know they had. The scraping of Giustino clearing the block from his end. Then a sound like a sigh. The entire volume of backed-up material releasing, and then from behind you, from the direction you came from, the liquid level at the entrance of the pipe rising. You're out. You're on the ground, on your back, gasping the outdoor air with all the enthusiasm of a man who's been in a pipe and is now outside a pipe. Giustino appears around the corner of the building, his hat in one hand. He looks at you. He looks at the cleared pipe entrance. He looks back at you. Done? He asks. Done, you say. A pause. You look terrible. I feel approximately how I look. He reaches into his jacket and produces a small flask. Grappa. The rough, burning kind that costs nothing and tastes like gasoline but is, in this moment, the finest thing in the world. You drink. The grappa burns down your throat and lights a small fire in your chest that feels impossibly like warmth, like something clean. You lie on your back on the ground at the fontanelle, smelling of everything and feeling the August sun on your face and thinking about the double pay and about your mother and about the way the pipe was perfectly dark except for that small oil lantern and the way Giustino's shovel sounded through 40 meters of concrete and how that sound was, in its way, the nicest thing you heard all day. The bones of 8 million people are somewhere under the ground, a few dozen meters away. They've been there for a long time. They don't seem bothered by the drainage problem. You get back to the deposit by 5 in the afternoon. Don Carmelo counts the day's receipts, his own ledger, his own numbers, the small transactions that constitute a week's work, the money the municipality pays per load cleared, the deductions for materials, the wages for 4 men, and he makes notes with a carpenter's pencil in a notebook that's been repaired with twine 3 times. He pays you your day's wage plus the double pay supplement for the fontanelle job in lire coins that have been counted out with the precision of someone who has counted money carefully his whole life and knows that imprecision has consequences. You put the coins in your inner pocket where they sit against your chest. Tomorrow, Don Carmelo says. The Vico della Siriglio has a problem with the immondezzaio near number 7. Be there by 4:30. 4:30, you confirm. He nods. That's it. The day is concluded. You walk back toward the Quartieri. The city in the evening is a different city than the city in the morning. The same city, the same buildings, the same streets, the same bells from the same churches, but the quality of the air has changed. The heat of the day has peaked and begun to release. Not much, not enough to be cold, but enough that the air moves again, carries things. The smells of cooking rise from thousands of windows and drift through the alleys. Tomato and garlic, the sweet savoury smell of simmering ragu, frying fish, the sharp green smell of fresh basil. These smells have been there all day, but they were overwhelmed by the daytime smells of the working city. Now, in the evening lull, they come forward. People are outside. The Bassi have disgorged their inhabitants into the streets, which is the Quartieri's evening ritual, the way that 40,000 people manage the paradox of living in spaces too small for 40,000 people. They inhabit the street instead. Chairs carried out, tables set up in alleys, dinners eaten collectively in the open air, the narrow lanes functioning as extended living rooms. Children running in games whose rules change from street to street. Old women in doorways commenting on everything that passes with the authority of people who have earned their opinions through decades of observation. You walk through it all, you are, as noted, not smelling great. People you pass give you the particular look that people give Netturbini in Naples. Not unkind, not exactly, because everyone in this city understands that the man with the cart and the shovel is performing a service, that without him the alleys would be impassable within a week, that the business of waste removal is the business of survival and everyone knows it. But also a certain distance, a slight leaning away, the instinctive body response to smell. You're used to it. At the fountain on the Salita, you join the evening queue. This is the washing queue, the people cleaning themselves at the end of the workday, which includes you, and also includes the tanner from the Sanitar district whose smell makes even you take a small step back, and a very small child who has covered himself in something unidentifiable and is now presenting this fact to his mother with the philosophical calm of someone who knows the outcome is inevitable. When you get to the fountain, you stripped to the waist and you wash. The water is cold and comes out fast from the iron spout and hits your arms and your chest and your neck and the back of your neck like a judgment. You scrub with the hard soap you carry in your jacket pocket, a lye soap, harsh, that strips skin along with everything else, and you scrub your arms up to the elbow twice, and your face, and your neck, and when you're done you stand dripping on the stones of the piazza while the evening sun dries the water on your skin, and the smell of the lye soap briefly drowns out everything else. You're not clean. Not really. The kind of clean that comes from a day's work in the channels of the Quartieri Spagnoli is not the kind of clean that a single fountain visit achieves. That kind of clean would require hot water and time, and the kind of facilities available only in the Chiaia district bathhouses that cost more than you make in a day. But you're cleaner. You put your shirt back on, you walk home, the berceau on the Vico della Serpe is in the evening a different space than the one you left in the dark at 4 a.m. Donna Giovanna has cooked. The smell of it fills the building, not just the basso, all 4 floors, drifting up the stairwell that connects all of them. The smell of pasta e patate, pasta and potatoes, the classic poor Naples dish, carbohydrates stacked on carbohydrates, filling and cheap and done right, which Donna Giovanna does right, magnificent. And the background note of the dried fish that's been hanging in the kitchen corner for a week and will be used in tomorrow's broth. The table has been extended, a board placed across 2 sawhorses to lengthen it, and the evening meal is communal. This is the arrangement in the barso. You pay Donna Giovanna a certain amount per month for your sleeping space, and included in that amount is breakfast, bread usually, and the evening meal. It's not a restaurant. It's the way that working people in this city manage food communally, efficiently, sharing the economics of cooking for 12 people instead of 12 people cooking separately. Zu Saverio the cobbler is already seated. He tells you about his day with the specificity of a man who finds his own profession endlessly fascinating, which you've decided is one of the more admirable human qualities. He fixed 7 pairs of shoes today. 1 pair was particularly interesting. The heel construction was unusual, foreign, possibly German. He demonstrates the heel construction with the bread. Concetta, the child with the cough, is seated near the window. She coughs twice during the meal in the specific way she coughs. A dry, shallow cough, careful, like someone trying to do something quietly. And Donna Giovanna touches her shoulder briefly and the conversation continues. You eat pasta e patea with the same focused attention that Pepiello gives his bread in the morning. The pasta is thick, the potatoes soft, the broth savoury with the lard, and garlic and a piece of old cheese rind that's been cooking in it since lunch. It is, if you think about it without prejudice, without the context of everything else in your day, without the channels and the pipe and the pool at the fontanelle, without the smell that no amount of soap entirely removes, it is genuinely delicious. You eat 2 full bowls. Donna Giovanna's youngest boy, who's maybe 4, sits across from you and watches you eat with the evaluative gaze of a food critic. At some point he decides you're doing it correctly and goes back to his own bowl. After the meal, the table is cleared. The communal space becomes a communal evening. Donna Giovanna mending, Zu Saverio reading a newspaper he's found somewhere. The children in various states of pre-sleep chaos. The room warm from the residual heat of the cooking fire and the collective warmth of 12 bodies. You sit on your pallet. The day's events sit with you. Here's a thing you've been thinking about, and you Think about it more on evenings like this when you're physically exhausted and your mind goes somewhere else while your body does nothing. Don Carmelo's phrase, before it changes. What does it mean to be a city that changes? Naples has been changing since before there was a Naples, since the Greeks founded Neapolis on the bay in the 6th century BC, since the Romans built their villas and their roads and their markets on the same volcanic rock that you walk on today, since the Normans and the Angevins and the Aragonese and the Spanish and the Bourbon kings all took turns at the helm of a city that outlasted all of them. The city changes, and yet the city is, in some essential way, always the same. The Bassi have been there for centuries, the channels have been there for centuries. The waste has always needed moving, the water has always needed carrying. The poor have always lived close to each other in spaces that are too small, and the rich have always lived with views of the bay, and the middle layer between them has always conducted its commerce in the spaces in between. But something is changing now that is different. You've heard people talk about the risanamento, the sanitation, the great urban renewal project that various governments and various municipal authorities have been discussing, planning, arguing about for years. The project to gut Naples, there's that word again, sventra, to disembowel, to tear out the diseased tissue of the old city and replace it with something modern, something with sewers, with wide streets, with light. It's been discussed since at least 1860, when Italy became a unified country, and Naples stopped being the capital of its own kingdom and became the largest city of a nation that wasn't quite sure what to do with it. And the risanamento will come. Not this year. This year the cholera epidemic will make its point in the most terrible possible way. And in the years after the epidemic, the political will to actually do something will finally crystallize. The king will visit. He will see. He will say the thing about gutting the city. Money will be allocated. Contracts will be signed. And the Quartieri Spagnoli, the narrow alleys, the bassi, the buildings pressing together overhead, the laundry overhead, the children's chalk drawings on walls that have stood for 300 years, will be changed. Not entirely, not immediately, but the city that you are living in, the city that Don Carmelo told you to look at before it changes, will not exist in the same way in 20 years. The bones at the fontanelle will still be there. The tough underground will still be there. But the streets above, the life above, will be rearranged, rebuilt, the light admitted, the channels covered, new pipes laid. The cholera will leave, the risanamento will come, and the people who currently live in the Bassi, the 40,000 in the Quartieri, the families in the Sanitì, the workers in the buildings that get demolished to make the new streets. Where will they go? The city has opinions about this that it hasn't fully formed yet. The record suggests they will go somewhere adjacent, somewhere slightly less visible, somewhere the planners aren't currently looking. Cities have always solved their housing problems by moving the problem one street over. But that's not now. Now is 1884, and the city is still this. The narrowness, the darkness, the smell, the extraordinary vitality of people living close, the bones of the ancient world underfoot, the bones of the recent dead in the caves at Fontanelle, the bones of the very poor in the churchyard at the end of the street. Don Carmelo was right to say, "Look, you're looking." Concetta coughs again from across the room, a longer cough this time, and Donna Giovanna puts down her mending and goes to the child, and you hear their voices, low, the voice of a mother and the voice of a sick child, and the sound of a hand on a small back, and the room is Quiet with the specific quality of quiet that exists around illness, the slight withdrawal, the listening. Zeus Saverio folds his newspaper. The youngest boy is already asleep in the corner. You lie back on your pallet. The sounds of the Quartieri come through the high, small window. Voices in the alley. Someone's argument 2 floors up, conducted entirely in rapid Neapolitan, that you still don't fully follow. You understand Italian, your school Italian from the village. But Neapolitan is a different language, really. It just wears Italian's coat. The distant bells of the Gesù Nuovo marking 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock means 5.5 hours until Don Carmelo's courtyard. You should sleep. But your mind is still in the day. It was 3 weeks after you arrived, 3 weeks of the channels and the carts and the early mornings and Don Carmelo's economical communication style, that you first heard the word cholera spoken with any weight. It was Giustino in the morning break, eating his bread with the deliberate movements of a man who has learned not to rush his food. Heard from someone in Santa Lucia, he said. Family sick, not the summer fever, the other kind. You didn't know what the other kind meant in the specific way he said it. He told you, cholera arrives fast. This is the thing about it that makes it different from the other diseases that cycle through the Quartieri. The fevers, the infections, the respiratory things that take Concetta's lungs 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Those diseases move at human speed, take weeks, give time to adjust, to treat, to worry properly. Cholera arrives in hours. You drink contaminated water from a cistern, from a well, from a fountain that's been contaminated by something upstream, from the hands of someone who handled contaminated material and didn't wash well enough, from the water the vegetable vendor used to keep his greens looking fresh. You drink it, and for a few hours nothing seems wrong, and then your body makes it very clear that something is catastrophically wrong, and from that point the illness runs its course in 12 to 24 hours. If it runs badly, you die of dehydration. In 1884, Naples, the case fatality rate in the worst hit districts is above 50%, 1 in 2. The same odds as a coin toss. Giustino knew this because he'd seen the 1866 epidemic. He was 8 years old and his father died in 4 days, and his mother survived and his older sister didn't. And he spent 6 weeks of that summer in a state of constrictive fear that he still keeps in a locked room somewhere in his body that you can see the door of when he talks about it. Same channels, he said, same water, same problem. He ate the rest of his bread. Keep your vinegar rag with you, he said, and don't drink from the cisterns, only the fountain. And if someone in your building gets sick, not cold sick, not fever sick, the other kind, you come and find me immediately. Don't wait. He hadn't said, 'cause we'll need to report it. He hadn't said, 'cause the municipality has procedures. He'd said, come and find me. Because in the Quartieri, in 1884, procedures are what happens to people who have the luxury of procedures, and what happens in the Quartieri is the informal network of people who know what to do and do it, and don't wait for anyone to give them permission. You thought about the cistern in the courtyard of the building on the Vico della Serpe, the one that Donna Giovanna uses when the fountain line is too long, the one whose position, relative to the channels, you'd begun to think about differently after Giustino's conversation. That evening, you told Donna Giovanna about the fountain, that the fountain water was better this summer, that it was worth the longer line. She'd looked at you with the specifically sharp intelligence of a woman who manages 12 people's lives in a small space with insufficient resources and doesn't miss much. You know, something, she'd said, not a question. I know what I see in the channels, you'd said. She'd nodded. After that, the cistern stayed closed. The thing about cholera in 1884, the thing that Robert Koch has just established, with the rigour of German science, in the specific language of bacteriology that is just beginning to enter the vocabulary of medicine, is that it is entirely, completely, 100% preventable by means that are entirely, completely available. Clean water, that's it. Clean water, and waste that doesn't contaminate drinking water, and the infrastructure to maintain both. The infrastructure is the problem. The infrastructure costs money and requires political will, and must be built somewhere. And the somewhere is always the difficult part, because building sewers and water pipes through a city that has been building on top of itself for 3,000 years is not a simple engineering problem. The tough is hard. The underground is full of surprises. The buildings that need to stay standing while you work beneath them have foundations that go down to God knows what era. The infrastructure is the problem, and the infrastructure costs money, and the money was for several decades spent on other things, and meanwhile the people of the Quartieri drank from their cisterns and died from their cisterns, and the cycle continued. This is not a story about villains. There's no one person who decided that 40,000 people should die in waves of preventable disease. There are systems, economic systems, political systems, the system of what a city decides its priorities are, and those systems operated in the specific way that systems operate, when the interests of the people making decisions are not the interests of the people affected by them. Don Carmelo knows this. He's known it for 30 years. He clears the channels so the disease spreads a little less quickly, and he pays his workers what he pays them, and he goes home to his 2-room apartment on the Calata Trinta Maggiore, and he touches the Madonna, and he does it again tomorrow. He's not going to change the water system. He's not going to rebuild the Quartieri Spagnoli. He's going to make sure his channels are clean. And the people who drink from the wells near his channels have a slightly better chance than the people who drink from the wells near the channels that no one clears. That's what he has. That's what you have. You pick up your shovel, you clear what can be cleared. 3 days after the Fontanelle job, a family on the Vico del Fico, 2 streets from the Immondezzaio you cleared, loses 2 members in 48 hours. A man, 42 years old, who worked in the port unloading ships. A girl, 9, whose name you learn later was Carmela. You know about it because Giustino comes to find you in the morning, finds you before the break, which means it's urgent, and tells you in the specific quiet voice he uses for things that require quiet. The family at number 6, he says. You stop moving the cart. The bad kind, you ask. He doesn't answer, which is its own answer. Don Carmelo knows. Don Carmelo knows. He's already been to the Guardia Sanitaria. The Guardia Sanitaria, the municipal health office, has procedures for this. The procedures involve reporting the case, applying for disinfectant from the municipal depot, having the affected space fumigated with sulphur, removing the bedding and clothing for incineration, posting a notice on the door. The procedures are bureaucratic and expensive and slow. The disease is none of those things. You don't see the family directly. You see the aftermath. The men from the health office arriving with their equipment. The sulphur smoke beginning to pour from the window of number 6, visible in the morning light as a yellowish haze that drifts into the alley and makes everyone who passes cough. The notice on the door, a printed card with a stamp that says in formal Italian what everyone in the street already knows. The street around number 6 has gone quiet in the particular way that streets go quiet around cholera. Not empty. People still pass, still work, still carry their water from the fountain and their bread from the baker. but quiet in the sense of the specific consciousness that exists around something feared. People are aware of number 6 the way you're aware of a fire that's under control but not out. The children are still playing, just slightly further away. Donna Giovanna, when you get back to the basso that evening, has boiled the water, all of it. The pot on the fire is full, the tin cups have been washed in the hot water, and the cistern in the courtyard has a board across it and a stone on top of the board. She doesn't explain this. She doesn't need to. You eat your meal in the warm room with the sound of boiling water as background music, and Concetta coughs her dry, careful cough, and Zeus Saverio reads his newspaper, and the youngest boy sleeps in the corner, and the city continues outside the window, alive and dense and full of the specific human noise of people getting through another day in a city that has always required getting through. The morning after the Vico del Fico case, Don Carmelo gives you and Giustino a different job. Disinfectant application. The municipality has distributed through the health office quantities of a disinfecting solution. Calcium hypochlorite, the chloride of lime, the same material they use to treat sewage in the more progressive European cities. And there are men whose job it is to go through the affected streets, applying it to the channels, the waste collection points, the walls near the Bassi doors. You are now one of those men. The equipment is simple. A metal tank with a hand pump, a nozzle, a supply of the disinfectant mixed with water. The smell of the chloride of lime is sharp and chemical and alien in the organic symphony of the Quartieri's usual smells. Something antiseptic and industrial in a neighbourhood that smells of nothing industrial, of nothing that has come from a factory, of nothing that isn't the direct product of human bodies and the food they process. The irony of it. The disinfectant smells wrong here. It smells like absence, like the smell of something being removed, which is in fact precisely what it is. You pump the solution into the channels on 5 streets. You spray the walls near the Immondizio points. You do the stone step of every basso door on the Vico del Fico, moving methodically down the alley, the pump hissing and clicking, the solution landing on dark stone and making it briefly paler, chalky, the colour of something being treated. The people in the doorways watch you work. Some of them thank you. Some of them say nothing. One old man tells you it won't work, that the disease is God's judgment and no amount of chemicals prevents God's judgment, and you say yes, Don Carmine, and continue, spraying the channel outside his door. An old woman in a doorway 3 numbers down watches you approach and then, just as you get to her door, brings out a bucket of water and tips it onto the step you were about to treat. You stop. She looks at you. "I've been washing that step for 40 years, she says. "It doesn't need anything else." You look at the step. It is in fact one of the cleaner steps in the alley. The stone is worn smooth and grey, and shows the evidence of 40 years of regular washing. You nod at her. You move to the next door. Here is a thing about the cholera epidemic of 1884, and about epidemics in general, and about what it's like to live inside one when you don't yet know you're living inside one. It doesn't arrive as an event. It doesn't ring a bell and announce itself. It seeps in. One case, then another, then a cluster, then a neighbourhood, then a district. And for a long time, longer than seems reasonable looking back, life continues. People go to work. The vendors sell their food. The children play in the alleys. The bells ring on the hour. The fountain line forms before dawn. Because what else would you do? You can't stop the city. You can't put 40,000 people somewhere while you fix the infrastructure. You clean what you can clean, treat what you can treat, boil the water and keep the cisterns closed and pray to whichever saints you have cultivated relationships with in the fontanelle or elsewhere, and you continue. You're 17 years old and you've never lived through a cholera epidemic. Giustino's body knows it from 1866. There's a quality of attention in him that you recognize now as the specific attention of a man who survived something once and is watching for its return. But you don't have that knowledge in your body yet. You have in your mind, in the conversations, in the information Don Carmelo has given you. And what Don Carmelo has given you in his economical, precise way is this. Do the work. Clear the channels. Apply the disinfectant. Keep the water clean. You can't stop cholera. You can make it slightly harder for cholera to move. That's the job. On a Sunday in late August, the Sunday you are given free, the Sunday that the shop is closed and the law says so, or in your case the Sunday that Don Carmelo doesn't require you, which is as close to law as it gets, you go up the hill. Giustino takes you, which he offered to do weeks ago when you first told him you'd never been up. You leave at 7 in the morning before the full August heat arrives, and you walk uphill. Not to the fontanelle this time, but further, west and up, through the Quartieri and out the top of it onto the streets that climb toward the Vomero, the hill that sits above the city, above the Quartieri, above everything. It takes 40 minutes of steady climbing, the streets shifting as you rise from the dense, dark warrens of the Quartieri into something broader, lighter, the buildings becoming lower and the air moving more freely. At a certain point the sound changes, the dense urban noise of the Quartieri falling into a different register, a more distant thing, and above it the sound of wind and birds and the kind of quiet that exists when you're above most of the noise rather than in the middle of it. The Castel Sant'Elmo stands at the top of the Vomero hill, a fortress built by the Angevins in the 14th century, modified and expanded by the Spanish in the 16th, used as a political prison through the following centuries, a large star-shaped hulk of grey tuff that dominates the entire western horizon of Naples. To reach it you pass the Certosa di San Martino, the Carthusian monastery, built at roughly the same time as the castle, its white Baroque facade visible from most of the city below, its cloister gardens hidden from the street, its museum containing several centuries of Neapolitan art, and one extremely good collection of presepe nativity scenes, the Neapolitan Nativity, which is a whole other story for another night. But today you walk past the Certosa, past the castle gate, to the edge of the escarpment, and you see Naples. The view from the Vomero is the view that painters came for. From the top of the hill the city falls away from you toward the sea in a great cascade. Rooftops and domes and the web of streets invisible from this height, the whole thing resolved by distance into something that looks like it was designed rather than accumulated, like someone planned for it to look exactly like this from above. The bay curves south in the classic shape that everyone who's seen a painting of Naples recognizes. Vesuvius to the east, its summit trailing a faint pennant of smoke or cloud. You can never be sure which, and neither, you suspect, can Vesuvius. The islands of Capri and Ischia beyond, and the whole thing set in a blue that the word blue is too small for. You stand at the edge and look at it. The harbour far below is full of ships. The forest of masts that you've walked past at street level, that you see as a wall of wood and rope from the waterfront, resolves from here into a pattern, a dense cluster of vessels whose purpose and arrangement is suddenly legible in a way it isn't when you're in the middle of it. The big three-masted merchant ships, the smaller coastal vessels, the steamships, newer than the rest, their funnels distinguishing them, already changing the harbour as the century moves toward its end. Through those ships comes everything: the grain from Apulia, the cloth from the north, from Milan and Turin, the wine from Sicily, the goods from the east through the Suez Canal, which opened 15 years ago and has made Naples, halfway between the Atlantic and the Canal, even more central to the shipping lanes of the world. The people, the emigrants who come down from the mountains of Campania and Basilicata and Calabria to take a ship west across the Atlantic to a country they've heard about but never seen, and from those ships onto the docks, through the customs houses, up the streets to the warehouses of the Spazanapoli and the Quartieri and the markets of the city. Everything arrives through the harbour, and from the harbour, and from the markets, and from the people, and from the overflow of the channels, and from the wells and the cisterns and the ancient water systems that the city inherited from Rome, the disease moves. Giustino stands beside you, eating a piece of bread he's brought in his coat pocket. He's not looking at the view, or rather, he's looking at it in the way of someone who has seen it many times and now regards it as a familiar companion rather than a spectacle. The way you stop seeing the bells after the first month. Beautiful, you say, because that's the only word and it's insufficient. Beautiful, he agrees. Also the source of approximately every problem Naples has. You look at him. The bay, he says, all that trade, all those ships. Every epidemic we've had, it came off a ship. Every good thing and every bad thing, it came off a ship. The city can't exist without it and can't stay healthy with it. He takes a bite of bread. Same with the people. All those people from everywhere, the mountains, Sicily, Calabria, coming here. They come because there's work. The work is here because of the port. The port makes the density. The density makes the channels back up. He gestures at the city below. It's all the same system, he says. The ships and the channels and the cisterns and the Bassi and Don Carmelo's cart. All connected. You look at the bay, at the ships, at the city between you and the water. 300,000 lives, compressed into the space between your current position and the water's edge. All of them drinking water and producing waste and living and dying according to the logic of a system that doesn't work properly and has never worked properly and has been promising to work properly for at least a century. And the risanamento, you ask? When they gut the city? Giustino eats the last of his bread, dusts his hands. Then it'll be different, he says. New channels, new pipes, wide streets so the light gets in. The old Bassi knocked down, the old buildings cleared. A pause. Better for the sickness, probably. Worse for a lot of people who live there now, at least for a while. He looks at the city. It'll still be Naples, he says, just with less cholera. Hopefully. A seabird crosses the view below you, gliding on the thermal rising from the hot stones of the city, riding the air above 40,000 lives as if they're just warm ground. You watch it until it disappears toward the bay. Coming down the hill is always different from going up. Going up, you're working, you're arriving, the view is a destination. Coming down, you're re-entering, the city reaches up to swallow you back. The streets narrow as you descend, the sky shrinks, the sounds return, not from far away, from all sides simultaneously. The full spectrum noise of Naples resuming its hold on your senses like a familiar grip. By the time you're back in the Quartieri, the view from the Vomero seems slightly unreal, the way a dream seems slightly unreal in the middle of the afternoon, when the work of the day has put too much distance between you and sleep. But it stays with you, the way the ships looked from above, ordered, purposeful, a mechanism. The bay, Vesuvius trailing its ambiguous smoke, and the city between, dense as a body, all its systems running. The waste and the water and the narrow streets and the 40,000 lives and the bones underground. All of it connected. All of it, in some sense, one thing. The epidemic runs its course through September and into October. The total dead are not yet being accurately counted. The Health Office keeps official records, but the official records of the Quartieri Spagnoli in 1884 are incomplete in ways that the people who live there understand and the people who keep statistics don't. What you see, a change in the street. The fountain line is longer because the word has reached everyone that the cisterns are dangerous and the fountain is safer. The Emendesaio visits are more frequent because the health office is paying for additional removal. 3 bassi on the Vico del Fico have the notice on their doors, and 3 families have been moved, some to relatives outside the city, some to the quarantine space the municipality has set up in a building near the port. What you see, Don Carmelo's crews working longer days, the disinfectant application doubling its coverage, the channels being cleared faster with less waiting between visits. Not because the system has changed, but because Don Carmelo is running his contract at a loss, spending more in labour and materials than the municipality is reimbursing. And he's doing it because he's lived here for 50 years and because the Madonna on the shelf in his office has been listening to him talk about the 1866 epidemic for 18 years. And there are some things you just do because they need doing. You work longer days. Your back disagrees with longer days. Your back has been filing formal complaints through the medium of a persistent ache that lives in the right side just above the hip, where the shovel talks wrong when you're in a tight channel. You've developed the habit of pressing your fist into this spot during breaks. A self-administered pressure that does something, though you can't say exactly what. Giustino showed you this. He does it too, has been doing it for years. And seeing an adult man performing this routine act of self-repair made you feel both worse and better in equal measure. Worse because it confirmed the permanence of the damage. Better because it confirmed the damage is manageable, survivable, something to work around rather than surrender to. You work around it. In October, the epidemic abates. Not because anything has been fixed. The channels are still the same channels. The cisterns are still the same cisterns. The bassi are still the same bassi. But because cholera is seasonal, tends to retreat with the heat, and the October rain washes the streets with a thoroughness that the netturbini with their carts never quite achieve. The mortality rate in the Quartieri Spagnoli is higher than anywhere else in the city, except possibly the Sanità. 7,000 dead across the city. Approximately 7,000. The king will come. He's already announced it. Umberto I, who's been king of unified Italy since 1878, has announced that he will visit Naples, will tour the affected districts, will stand in the streets where the disease was worst. He will visit the Quartieri Spagnoli, and he will say the thing. Bisogna sventrare Napoli. It's necessary to gut Naples. Meaning, the infrastructure must change. The streets must be widened. The bassi must be cleared. The tunnels must be expanded into proper sewers. The water system must be rebuilt. He's right. Everything he says in the broad strokes is right. The risanamento will take 30 years and displace hundreds of thousands of people, and will, as Giustino suggested, be better for some and worse for others. and the cholera will eventually go away, and the Quartieri Spagnoli will still be the Quartieri Spagnoli in the 21st century, still narrow, still dark, still alive in ways that the renovated districts never quite are. Because there's something about the narrow streets and the bassi and the 40,000 people in a very small space that produces a quality of human intensity that doesn't survive widening. But that's later. For now it's October of 1884 and the rain is cleaning the streets and the epidemic is retreating and you're 17 years old, standing in a courtyard in the Quartieri Spagnoli at 4:30 in the morning with a shovel in your hand. Don Carmelo is in the doorway of his office when you arrive. He has his coffee. He has the air of a man who's been there for a while thinking. He looks at you when you come through the gate, and there's something in his expression that's different. Not warmer, exactly. Don Carmelo does not do warm as a category, but different. The look of someone who's seen a thing through and come out the other side and is noticing slightly who else made it out. Esposito, he says. Don Carmelo. A pause. He drinks his coffee. The Vico del Fico is clear, he says. The channel at Sant'Anna is holding. The Fontanelle deposit hasn't backed up since your visit to August. This is not a speech. In Don Carmelo's economy of language, this is an oration. You wait. In March, he says, I'm taking on the contract for 2 additional streets, the Calata Trinita Maggiore and part of the Via Toledo. The municipality is expanding the cleaning zone. A pause. I'll need a section chief. Someone who knows the Sant'Anna channel and the Fontanelle junction and how to talk to the health office men without losing them. He looks at you. That look. The one that strips assessment of anything unnecessary and just measures what's there. That could be you, he says, if you're still here in March. And then he turns back into the office and the conversation is over. You stand in the courtyard with your shovel. The other workers are arriving. Raphael, Pepiello. 2 men you've started to learn the names of who were taken on during the epidemic's height and have stayed on because the workload is still elevated. Giustino arrives last, as always, pulling on his jacket. He looks at you standing with the shovel. You all right? He asks. Don Carmelo said, you start. I know what he said. He said it this way, as if he's been waiting for Don Carmelo to say it, as if this is a thing that was inevitable and simply needed time. You look at him. You knew? He shrugs. The Neapolitan shrug, the one that contains entire paragraphs of contextual information encoded in a single movement of the shoulders. The shrug that says, yes, I knew, and I didn't say anything, and that was the right call, and you'll understand why eventually. March is a while away, he says. You'll earn it or you won't. But he doesn't say things like that without already knowing the answer. He picks up his own shovel. Vico del Fico first today, he says. The rain last night will have moved things, you say. He looks at you. Moved things, he agrees. And the 2 of you go to work. The weeks that follow are weeks of ordinary things. The channels, the carts, the early mornings and the cold stone floor and the cold fountain water, and Zeus Saverio's cobbling anecdotes, and Donna Giovanna's pasta, and Concetta's cough, which is finally, tentatively, getting better in the cooler weather, as if the October air is something her lungs can handle in a way the August air couldn't. Ordinary things. You're learning the city the way you learn any difficult thing, not all at once, not through explanation, but by repeated contact with its specifics until the specifics accumulate into a knowledge that lives in your hands and your feet and your nose rather than in your head. You know which part of the Vico del Fico floods after a particular kind of rain and needs a different approach. You know which of the municipality's health office men can be reasoned with, and which needs to see paperwork before he'll move. You know the weight of a full cart of compacted immondezza, somewhere between 200 and 250 kilos depending on what's in it, and the specific effort needed to push it through the narrow streets without hitting the walls. You know the smell of a channel that's clear versus a channel that's developing a problem versus a channel that's gone critical. You can smell this distinction from 3 meters away, and the knowledge lives in your nose the way a cooper knows wood or a baker knows dough, below the level of thought, faster than language. You know the faces of the quartieri, the vendors, the residents, the other workers, the woman who washes her steps every morning regardless of what you spray on them afterward, the cobbler from Benevento who nods at you in the dark, the old men on the benches of the Piazza Dante arguing the argument that has no end. You know the feel of the tuff underfoot, the specific hardness of it, the way it rings different from other stone, a slightly hollow sound, always, because somewhere under your boots there are tunnels, because this city is built on its own underground history, and you feel that history in the slight resonance of the streets. You are, without having decided to be, becoming someone who belongs here. On a night in November, cool now, the real autumn having arrived with the November rains, the streets wet and reflecting the candlelight from the basso windows, you sit on the step of the deposit courtyard gate after work and eat a piece of bread and watch the quartieri do its evening thing around you. The laundry is down from the windows in the rain. Without it, the alleys look wider, the sky more present. Rain makes the stones dark and clean, strips the accumulated dust, washes the gutters with a thoroughness that no cart achieves. Naples in the rain is a different city than Naples in the sun, quieter, slightly. The vendors come in from the streets. The old women retreat from their doorway chairs. The children's games move into whatever indoor space is available, which is not much indoor space, which means the games continue with reduced range and increased intensity. You eat your bread. A cat comes to investigate you from across the alley, stopping at a cautious distance, assessing you with the professional thoroughness that cats bring to all assessments. You don't have anything the cat would want. The cat, processing this, sits down and begins cleaning its face, performing the operation with the same focused attention you bring to the channels. Something about this comparison feels accurate. You think about your mother. You think about the village in Avellino province, the stone houses on the hillside, the smell of the mountain air in October, the specific cold of a morning there that's different from the cold of a morning in Naples. Drier, harder, a mountain cold rather than a sea damp cold. You think about your father in the fields, the work of his hands on the land, the way his knowledge of the soil is like your knowledge of the channels, accumulated, lived, below language. You think about the letter you sent 2 months ago, after the epidemic started to ease, a letter that said, "I am well. The work is hard. I am learning. I'm sending 20 lire for the winter, attached to this letter. I hope it arrives safely. Please tell me how everyone is." You have not yet received a reply. The mail from the mountains of Avellino to the Quartieri Spagnoli of Naples travels through several layers of intermediary, and replies take time, and you've accepted this the way you've accepted the weight of the cart and the cold of the channel and the smell that no soap fully removes, as a fact of the world, as something to work around. But you miss them. You sit on the step in the rain and you miss your mother and your father and your brothers and the smell of the mountain air, and this is a thing you allow yourself to feel for exactly the time it takes to eat a piece of bread, and then you stand up and you go inside. Don Carmelo is in his office when you pass. He's writing in his ledger by candlelight the figures for the week, the careful accounting of a business that operates on margins thin enough to read through. He doesn't look up. Esposito, the Fontanelle deposit. Clear, you say. Checked it this morning. The channel at number 12. Cleared it at noon. It'll need another visit by Thursday. The accumulation pattern. I know the pattern, a pause, his pencil. Still moving. You know the pattern too. This is, from Don Carmelo, approximately equivalent to being told you're the finest netturbino in the city. You go upstairs. In the basso, Concetta is sitting at the table doing something by candlelight. Needlework, you think. The same mending that Donna Giovanna does. The kind of careful detail work that pays a few centesimi per piece. Her hands are small and quick, and she works with the concentration of someone who has learned to find a particular satisfaction in small, precise things. Her cough is better. Not gone. It's probably never going to be entirely gone. The winters in the Quartieri leave their mark on the lungs of children who grow up in the damp and the dark, but better. A manageable thing, something she works around, the way you work around the shovel talk in your right hip. She looks up when you come in. Salvo, she says. The Neapolitan diminutive, the way the whole basso says your name now, having decided that Salvatore is too many syllables for regular use. Concetta. There's pasta left. Good. You sit on your pallet and unlace your boots and feel the specific relief of releasing your feet from 8 hours of boot weight. A relief that registers in your ankles and your calves and up through your shins, the whole architecture of the working day releasing at once. Donna Giovanna appears from the kitchen with the pasta. Tonight's pasta, which is pasta isezzi, pasta with chickpeas, the other working-class staple, and the chickpeas are soft and the broth is thick with their starch, and there's a piece of dried chili floating in it that turns the heat up past comfort into something that makes you exhale. You eat. The room fills slowly, Zu Saverio from his cobbling, the other residents from their various days, the candles on the table, the voices, the specific domestic sound of 12 people at the end of 12 separate days, all of them converging on this table, this room, this plate of food that cost Donna Giovanna exactly what she could afford and no more. Outside, the November rain on the stones of the Vico della Serpe, the sound of it on the single high window, a steady percussion. The night goes quiet. You lie in your basso in the dark after the candles are out, after the room has shifted to the sounds of sleeping people, and you listen to the city. Naples doesn't sleep. Not fully. The port works at night. The bakers work at night. The bread needs to be ready before dawn, which means the bakers are up at midnight, which means the fires are lit in the bakeries at 1 a.m, which means the smell of bread moves through the streets before anything else is awake. The night soil men work at night. The men who empty the pozzineri, the cesspits of the buildings that have them, the thick-bottomed barrels they carry on their shoulders through the dark streets, the sounds they make, the sounds the night soil makes, the night soil men. You think about them sometimes on nights when you lie awake and take stock of where you are in the city's hierarchy of labour. They are below you. This is not a comfortable thing to think, but it's true. In the order of the city's relationship with its own waste, you are not the lowest. There are people whose work is more invisible, more nocturnal, more completely excluded from daylight and acknowledgement. You are the morning shift, the visible shift, the one who works in the light, with the noise of the city around you, with the vendors and the children and the old women in doorways observing your work, They are the night shift, invisible by design. The city's relationship with their labour is a relationship of absolute denial. The city produces what they remove, needs what they do, and prefers to have no information about either. You think about them sometimes and you feel the specific vertigo of understanding that every system contains a version of this. The thing that's necessary and invisible, the work that keeps everything running that no one is supposed to know about. The channels, the cisterns, the bones under the street, all of it. The infrastructure of a city that needs to stay alive, maintained by the people the city would prefer not to think about. This is history for sleep, not the history of kings and proclamations, of battles and treaties and the large events that fill the official record and the textbooks. The other history, the history of the channel at 4 a.m, the history of the vinegar rag and the lye soap and the cold fountain water, the history of 40,000 people in the Quartieri Spagnoli producing what they produce, and the water moving through the stone, and the tough carrying everything, the weight of the living and the weight of the dead, and the weight of 3,000 years of human settlement on a hill above a bay beneath a volcano. The history that is, in the strictest sense, the history of what kept the city alive, not the palaces, not the paintings in the Certosa, not the grand gestures of kings on tour. This, the channel cleared at dawn, the cistern board closed and the stone placed on top, the disinfectant sprayed onto dark stone, the cart pushed through narrow streets in the grey light before the vendors arrived. The work that had to be done by the people who did it, in the city where they lived and worked and slept and woke and were, in their specific and unremarkable ways, the actual mechanism of the city's survival. You close your eyes. The sounds of Naples in November come through the window and around the window frame and through the cracks in the plaster, come through the walls the way the damp comes through the walls, without permission, without announcement, simply present. The rain on the stones, a cat calling from somewhere below, the distant sound of the port. It never entirely stops, the port. There is always a ship arriving or departing or being loaded or offloaded. There is always something crossing the bay toward the city or leaving the city toward somewhere else. The faint bells of some church. You've been here long enough to recognize which church by the sound of its bells, the way you recognize voices, the way you've come to know this place by its specific signatures. Your hands ache, a low, steady ache, the ache of a day's work done properly. Your back has its opinion. Your knees are saying something you're choosing not to listen to. You're warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have a roof over your head and work that matters, work that actually matters, work that is the difference between a street that makes people sick and a street that makes them slightly less sick, work that has a real consequence in the actual physical world, and you have a city that is, despite everything, a city worth knowing. You're becoming someone who belongs to this place. The boy from Avellino is still in there. He's in your hands, in the way you walk, in the way you think about the land and the air and the distance between yourself and home. But something else is there now too. Something that knows the channels, knows the cisterns, knows the smell of a problem before it becomes a crisis. Something that belongs, however imperfectly, however temporarily, however subject to the same forces that have always moved the poor of Naples from one place to another, something that belongs here. The rain comes harder now. You hear it on the high window, on the stones of the alley, on the rooftops above. The city is being washed. The channels run clean with rainwater. The gutters carry the night's accumulation toward the sea. Somewhere under the street, the ancient tuff absorbs what it absorbs. Somewhere in the cave at Fontanelle, the candlelights flicker in the wind from the cave entrance, and the skulls in their niches watch the living come and go, and the 8 million keep their patience. Somewhere a baker lights his fire. Somewhere a night soil man lifts a barrel. Somewhere on the Vomero hill the sea is visible in the dark, the lights of ships on the water, the volcano a dark shape against the sky. All of it connected, all of it in the morning, waiting. Your eyes are heavy now, the kind of heavy that comes when the body has decided the day is over and is simply informing the mind of this decision and waiting for the mind to catch up. The mind catches up. Centuries will pass. The Naples you're falling asleep in, the narrow streets and the Bassi and the channels and the smell of the Quartieri in August and the view from the Vomero and the bones at the Fontanelle will change. The risanamento will come. The cholera will go. The streets will be widened, the light admitted, the pipes laid. The tuff will still be under everything. The volcano will still be on the horizon. The bay will still be the bay. The ships will change. Steam, then diesel, then container ships so large they barely fit under the crane arms, but they'll still come and they'll still carry things, and Naples will still be where they come. People will still live in the Quartieri, still argue from their windows, still eat pasta assesi at tables extended with boards, still carry water home from wherever the water comes from. Some things don't change. The body at the end of a long day, the need for rest, the specific quality of sleep that comes after work done with your hands in the full physical world, the way the city sounds at 2 a.m. when it's raining and you're almost asleep. Almost. Let sleep come. Let it come the way the rain comes, without announcement, from above, the whole body receiving it. Let the channels fill with clean rain. Let the tuff absorb it. Let the city run. You've earned this rest. The shovel, the cart, the channel at 4:30 in the morning, the pipe at the Fontanelle, the disinfectant on the dark stones. All of it, you've done it. All of it earned. The candle on the shelf is already out. The room breathes around. You. Concetta breathes. Zeus Averio breathes. The youngest boy breathes in the corner with the complete uninhibited trust of small children, who believe without evidence that the world will be there in the morning. It will be there. It always is. The rain, the city, the bells, somewhere, marking an hour you're too tired to count, and then just rest. The long, unhurried fall into sleep, the way the tuff absorbs water, slowly, completely, without resistance, and the city continues outside, alive, breathing, old beyond counting, young as this morning, exactly as it always was. Good night.